So, Roadtrip. I did grow up in the Ignite youth community, and one of my first experiences as a young person with the Ignite youth community was a road trip. I was 14, and 18 of us piled in a bus, and when they were putting on this summer school down in Bathurst, New South Wales. Anyone from New South Wales? Yeah. So, we got in a bus. We were really excited. A few of us had grown up together because our parents were involved in a manual community, but we didn't know each other super well, most of us. So 18 of us in a van ride, about 14, 15 hours down to Bathurst. We were going to get to know each other pretty well. A few things went wrong in this road trip. Who's ever been on a road trip and everything's gone completely right? 100% smooth, it's been awesome. Yeah, there's always a couple of surprises, right? Well, we had a couple of surprises. The first thing that happened is I think we were just past Warwick, so not that far south. And I'm sitting in the back seat Bevan, and I see this black thing fly past my window. I'm like, whoa. And then I see this other black thing fly past my window. I'm like, whoa, like what is going on? And then I see a chunk of tyre fly past my window. And I'm like, driver, stop. And we'd lost a tyre, massive tyre blowout. So it was summer, it was January, hence we were going to a summer school. And middle of the day, I think it might have been 12 o'clock, and there's 18 of us pile out of the van. We're waiting for RACQ to come and help us out and put a new tyre on, and it took hours. First thing that went wrong, but, you know, we're all yarning, we're having good chats, we're getting to know each other. We get back in the car, we're driving, we're about 2 hours behind schedule, and we're driving in a pretty flat stretch, and we see in front of us just lightning start hammering the horizon. And this time I was sitting towards the front, didn't want to see the tyres blow off next time, start seeing this electrical storm. And I hear the leaders, like the old people who are supposed to look after us and make sure we get there safe, I hear one of them in the front seat go, oh, and I'm thinking, that's not good. And what we did, we had 18 people in a 21-seater, and it was like a 10-day camp. So we had a fair bit of luggage, and that was all in an open trailer in the back. Rain comes, right? What are we going to do? We all climb out of the van, we all grab our luggage, and we chuck 18 people's, most of us teenage girls, luggage into a 21-seater van with now 18 humid, hot, sweaty, and wet people into the van. No aircon. Enjoy your aircon, nutty team, you're lucky. And it was disgusting. Storm clears, all good, but there's a pool of water in the trailer. Can't put our luggage, it's there to stay. We pull up to our accommodation for the night. There's a pool. All 18 of us get really excited. Like, don't ask the leader because then they're going to say no. We run out of the van, jump in the pool fully clothed, all of us, and we go, ugh. It was warm like a bath. It was so disgusting. Quickly jump out, get dinner, pizza, looked like roadkill. It was probably whatever. I still remember 15 years later how disgusting that pizza tasted. Not like the beautiful Domino's put on for you this evening. Thanks, Domino's. We have a night's sleep. We get back in the car. We're thinking, great, what can go wrong? 5 hours to get there. And we start to smell this funny smoke, maybe an hour into the trip. And we say to driver, hey, Mark, I smell a fire. And he goes, all right, guys, stops the car. He goes, everyone just stay in the car. A couple of minutes later, he opens the van door, everyone get out of the car, get out, get out, get out. So all 18 of us are running out into the hot sun again, and the engine was about to blow up on us. So they cool the engine down. Bad news is we're not going to be able to drive the van. So we're stuck, I think, somewhere, I can't even remember the name of the place now. We're told we're going to have to get a train. So we're sitting around in the sun for another couple of hours, waiting for a train. We finally get on a train. We finally rock up to this school in Bathurst about 6 hours after we're supposed to be there. And we walk into this beautiful chapel, and there's another, 100 odd people there, and they're all beautiful and in their nice clothes. And we walk in like the bogans from Brisbane, mud, sweat and tears everywhere. We stink, and I mean stink. Deodorant's come a long way in the last 15 years. It was not pleasant. But we turn up, and these people who I went on this trip with, most of them are still my closest mates these days, like now, 15 years later. Because what we experienced on that trip down was almost just as important as what we experienced when we got to this summer school. On the trip down, we developed these friendships and this relationship with each other that was so authentic, because when you spend that much time in a confined space with one another, you can't fake it. Those masks come off pretty darn quick, and you get the real side of people. And we're also really present to each other. We didn't have that thing at school or at uni or at work where you can kind of go under the radar and ignore each other. It was us for those 2 days. It was pretty full on, and we really kind of got to know each other in a way we couldn't have if we just turned up for orientation day or something like that. And the other thing was, we'd all made a decision to give up part of our holidays for us or for our parents to pay money for us to go to this summer school. And so we'd kind of been a little bit courageous in what we were going to do with our lives that summer. And I think these 3 things really bonded us and really gave us these awesome base for our friendship that has lasted so long. And I want to talk about these 3 things now as we go forward. I was talking to Father, can't remember his name, after Mass today, and if you were at Mass here, you would have experienced what I did, just this really real kind of guy. And I was saying to him, hey, thanks for being so authentic with us. And he goes, well, there's no point in being anything else. The rest would just be BS. Yes, priests swear. He did swear. I'm just saying BS. And I'm like, you're so onto it. He's like, if I just stood up there and I was pious, and I'm like, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. He goes, how are people going to relate to me because they know that's not actually me? He's like, I couldn't keep that up. And I think authenticity is something that we really struggle with in our culture. So much of our culture is about putting out there this image of what should fit the bar, or what should. And so little of it is about giving each other permission to just be who we actually are. In my job as campus minister down at Beanley, I'm part of this program called Rhema, which is kind of like a youth ministry program where a group of students hear about it and they'll commit to it at the beginning of year 10. And if they stay committed, they see it out for the next 3 years, and they do ministry, they learn about God, they do leadership skills, and it's about community. And we just had a Rhema weekend this weekend, and something that strikes me about these guys is how fresh it is for them to operate on that authentic level. So many of them come away saying, this is family, this is home, I feel safe. And I think that's because they're able to be who they are and not feel judged for that. And I think that's awesome that they have that space. But I think it's such a shame that that's not the norm in our culture. I was on Instagram today, talking about Instagram, and I saw this video that had been put up by this guy, Terry Crews. Has anyone seen White Chicks? And he's talking pretty vulnerably in this video, right? It's just him in his car. He's a little bit wacky. And he's talking about his journey with pornography addiction. And this guy said something so powerful. He said, when we keep something hidden, it has power over us. When we bring it into the light, it loses its power. How many of us feel so trapped by the things that we're too afraid to tell people? You know, when we're in Mass tonight and we pray those words, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the words and I shall be healed. We all say those words because we all have our crap that we all need to bring before God and we all need healed. Yet it's that stuff that God, he knows we've got it, That's why we have Lent leading into Easter. He knows we've got it. And yet that's the thing that kind of keeps us from authentic relationships with each other. So don't hear me say that you should be walking down the street or broadcasting to everybody, hey, I struggle with this, or this is my sin area, or this is this. Because that's probably not going to do you much good. You might leave you feeling pretty exposed and vulnerable and crying in the corner at night. But what I do passionately, wholeheartedly believe is that you need at least one, preferably more people in your life that you can be 100% you with, that you can go there with, that you can talk about that junk. You can talk about whatever that is that you're ashamed of. Bring that into the light and let God take its power. The second point I had that formed those relationships so well was we were present to each other. And because we had nowhere else to go, right? But I actually think it's a real gift. Same thing, I'm not against social media. I'm a little bit against some social media. But anyway, whatever, it's a different story. That's me, not my faith. But I am against not being present and not developing these real relationships. And I think this gift that God gives us in the sacraments, in the Holy Spirit, is that we have access to Him 24/7. That's my firm belief. And yet, how often are we present to Him in that? I really, really struggled with going to Mass. There's Sundays where I would prefer to sleep, and I would sleep in. My house may be like, you want to come to Mass? I'd be like, nah, bro. Or I'd just pretend not to hear her because I was asleep, or I actually was asleep and I didn't hear her, whatever. But I was really struggling with Mass, and I went to another camp this summer over in New Zealand, and these 10 days, again, there's something about setting aside time for God and being present to Him specifically. But in these 10 days, we had the opportunity to go to the sacraments every day, about 3 times a day. We're in this chapel. And at first I kind of resented it. I'm like, we're going again. And talking about wanting to sleep in a Sunday, New Zealand time difference meant that when they were getting up for 6 a.m. chapel time, it was 3 a.m. back in Australia. The first couple of days was super tough. And I really was like, oh, I'm not doing it, resented it. But by about day 3, I was starting to without knowing it, get really excited about being able to be in the presence of God. If you're not Catholic, or if you're a little bit like me and Mass or the Eucharist or adoration is something you struggled with, that's totally okay. Because I know for me, logically, it doesn't make sense that bread and wine is Jesus, and that's why it's faith. But I can't deny the peace I find when I'm in the presence of Jesus. And so I really want to say that for you to have that strong relationship with God, for you to go on that road trip with God, for you to journey with God, put yourself in His presence. We're so good at putting ourselves in His presence when we're at events, when we're at the mountaintop experiences, the summer camp, live, whatever we're at. It's really easy because we're surrounded by other people doing the same thing. It's really easy to seek out God and to put ourselves in His presence when we're hating on life, when we need God, when we're sad, when we're upset. But sometimes it's actually really difficult to find God in the everyday. And we have to kind of fight for that and protect that. And when I left New Zealand, I just, for the first time in a long time, grew up with Ignite Youth. I've been to a lot of these events, and I'm a bit of an introvert, so I usually leave these things and I'm so ready to go home. If you ask any of my students, usually by about mid-morning of the last day of camp, I get pretty cranky because I'm so ready for my own space. But what I experienced in New Zealand was I was like, I don't want to go. I really don't want to go. It was the first time in a very long time that I was like, I'm scared to go home, because I just had grown to love that intimacy I'd found with God over there so much that I was just petrified of losing it. But I came back and I went to Mass my first day back, and I just had that sense of peace of God's not just in New Zealand. God is in New Zealand, if anyone was wondering. But he's not just in New Zealand. He's everywhere. And being able to find that peace and that centering in the Eucharist is such a blessing. And if the Eucharist or adoration is something you struggle with, particularly in this time of Lent and Easter, then I really encourage you to put yourself there anyway. Go to Mass and just say, God, I don't get it, but I'm here, I'm showing up, and I'm open to you. The other thing that really impacted our relationships is that courage we had. I heard this awesome homily once. You're getting that I'm a bit of a fan of Mass now, and I'm trying to come to Mass. But if you don't, it's okay, we love you anyway. I heard this awesome homily once, and I've heard it a few times, so I don't know if you've heard this before, but he was talking about this priest. I call him Hugh Grant because he's 50, he's got grey hair, and he walks around with a little bit of swagger, his hips kind of go a second after he does. And he always wears his shirt unbuttoned to about here with his big chunky silver cross, and he's just got this swagger. I don't know, can't do it. But anyway, he's not Hugh Grant, one senior. And he was talking about how the opposite of love is fear. And I'd heard that before, and it was kind of easy for me to connect with that, often it's our fear that holds us back from love. Sure, but what he said that really challenged me was that the opposite of faith isn't doubt. The opposite of faith isn't uncertainty, but that the opposite of faith is actually certainty. Now, I'm someone who really likes to have control of my life and the things around me, and I like to have my 1-year plan, which is backed up by my 2-year plan, which is backed up by my 5-year plan, backed up by my 10-year plan. I could keep going. And having that security is something that I really cling to, and if I don't have it, if I'm a bit unsure, I get a little bit shaken up. And I see every year Year 12s leaving my school going through that kind of, oh gosh, I got no idea what's next. I've just had 17 years of my life dictated to me, or the path kind of set out. I don't know what I'm going to do. But what hearing these words, that faith is the opposite, it certainly did for me, was gave me so much excitement and so much hope. Actually, that kind of courage and that boldness to step out and be like, okay, God, yeah, I've got my 2-year plan, I've got my 5-year plan, I've got my 10-year plan, but most importantly, I've got you. And I will actually go where you send me. I'll actually be here for you, and I will actually try and open myself up to you every day and let you I want to say take the wheel, but I don't want to say take the wheel because it's Carrie Underwood. But I think courage is so highly underrated. And I also think we can miss what courage looks like. You know, I look at missionaries, I look at these netters, and that's pretty bold, giving up a year of their lives to hand it over to God, to step out in faith away from certainty and to say, all right, let's do this. And that's huge. But you know what? I look at a 15-year-old student hearing about a program about God that involves faith, who didn't grow up before they came to school even knowing who God was or haven't heard the name of Jesus, and going, oh, despite my friends, I'm going to put my hand up and I want to have a go. I want to hear that. Just that yes. There's so much courage in that. I see courage. I see courage in the people who wear the red shirts and who go, you know what, okay, I really struggle with feeling like I'm somebody that people would want to know, but I'm going to try and make other people feel comfortable coming into a space. I'm going to go and be the friendly face of Ignite Youth. And I see courage in people's relationships with God every time they get into that reconciliation line, every time they get into line for Mass. And I feel like when we miss those opportunities to be courageous, when we miss those opportunities to step out, we miss an opportunity to step out in faith and connect with God. Last thing I want to make today is like, a road trip is kind of a bit pointless if we're not going anywhere. We could get in our car. Who before they got their license or while they had their learners or the day they got their learners, they've sat their test, or maybe for the second or third time, sorry Dad, sat their test and they finally get their learners and they just want to go sit in the driver's seat. They're like, yeah, I can do this. And then they go on their first lesson and they're like, I never want to do this again. Yeah. You know, or sometimes I drive I live in Paddington, I work in Beenleigh. For those who aren't from Brisbane, half an hour, 40 minutes. Sometimes I get in the car in the morning and I get to work and I'm like, whoa, how did that happen? You know, like I'm in the car, I'm driving, but I'm not present. I promise you, Dad, I'm a safe driver. Sometimes we're not really present to what's going on. I think the beauty of our faith and the beauty of the God I know and the beauty of the God that loves me and that I love is that no matter whether I'm tuned into him or not, he's with me. You know, we think about our road trips, and I like to think of God as the car. Like, he's there. This is so cheesy, right? I get it. Sorry, bear with me. But, like, some people will carry underwood and say, like, Jesus, take the wheel, or, like, let him steer, or I'm just going to go hands off. Well, actually, that's not what we're meant to do. God gave us a gift of free will. God gave us the ability to make choices. God gave us the ability to choose him. But he is with us 24/7 all around. The minute we clue into the fact that he's there, it's just a million times more adventurous and fun. Moving towards Christ, I think sometimes that's the biggest step of courage, but actually sometimes I think it's the smallest step of courage as well. Often my students who don't have faith, remember I went on a footy trip 2 years ago and I would take all the boys to the first aid tent. That was my job, just chat to them as we were there, as they were getting strapped. And at the end of the camp, one of the guys said to me, he was only in year 10 at the time, and he goes, oh, Caitie, is your faith the reason you do what you do? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, no one else wanted to walk with us to the first aid tent. No one else cared if we were okay when we were there. Is that why you do what you do? And I said, oh, like, yeah, partly because I care about you guys, partly because I don't want to lose you, the footy team needs you, but yeah, actually, partly because my step towards Christ has opened my eyes to the importance of everybody that's here. And he said to me, oh, but like, I can't imagine myself ever doing that. And I said, well, I couldn't imagine myself ever doing that either. I couldn't imagine myself as a 14-year-old. I'm a youngest child, and the world kind of revolved around me a little bit at times growing up. And sometimes I think it's so much easier just to operate in our own narcissistic, selfish, it's all about me zone. But the jump between being someone who's so self-involved and self-driven, where you're always going to let yourself down and others down, to being someone who lets God use you is actually so small. It's actually the difference between not taking that step of courage, not choosing to be authentic, not choosing to be present to God in your life, and actually choosing to do it. So maybe you are here tonight because you have been invited by a friend. Maybe you're like, Caitie, I got all this, I'm committed, I'm on net, I'm ready to go. Maybe you're somewhere in between. Maybe you've been walking this journey for 50 years. But what we all need is to encounter Jesus freshly daily. If you're in that place where you're like, I have very little idea of who Jesus is, whether I want him in my life, or what the heck this deal's about, that's totally okay. The difference between you there and you taking a step with courage and moving towards Christ is literally saying, Jesus, I don't know. I don't know about you, about this, if this is real. But if you are real, then I'm here. Maybe your step towards Christ is coming back to the Eucharist. Maybe your step towards Christ is being authentic with somebody, is getting that area of sin in your life, whether it's lying, whether it's addiction, whatever it is. Maybe it's about finding that person you trust and getting real with them, because that will transform your life. Maybe it's going to reconciliation and being truly present to God. Maybe it's going to prayer teams later tonight when you have the opportunity and saying, I'm here. Whatever you got for me, I'm here. Maybe it's going up to someone you know you've hurt and saying, hey, can I talk to you? I'm sorry, and I'd love your forgiveness. Whatever that is, whatever your move toward Christ is, I pray right now, just before we start worship, that you'd have the courage to be real with yourself, to be present, and to really step out in faith and move towards Christ.